Good afternoon, everybody. Can we hear me on Zoom?
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks, Andrea. All right, well, I have 2 o'clock, so I guess I'll go ahead and get us kicked off. I just want to welcome everybody who's come to this meeting of the Clean Waters Initiative Workshop Series. Today, we're going to be talking about education outreach and volunteer coordination. So my name is Rachel Wyndham. I'm with the Houston-Galveston Area Council in the Community Environmental Department. And I'll go ahead and turn it over now to our first speaker of the day, which will be Kendall Goodrose, also with H-GAC. And I think I have your presentation loaded if you'd like.
Hey, we can't hear you.
Everyone, I'm Kendall Goodrose with H-GAC's Water Resources team. And today I just want to walk you through some of the education outreach and volunteer coordination resources that H-GAC has either developed or has through programs that we partner with. All of these programs are free to use and they relate to water quality and most of them specifically to non-point source pollution outreach. So the most accessible resources we have are actually part of our Coastal Communities project, and they are hosted online on the Coastal Communities website at www.coastalcommunitiestx.com. They make up what we call the Coastal Communities Toolbox, which is designed to be a one-stop shop for entities, whether they're organizations, cities, counties, to come and find resources they can use to either start or expand upon an existing outreach campaign that is related to reducing bacteria loads in local waterways. So some of those resources you can find on the website include an outreach roadmap and the roadmap messages, which are free and downloadable. The outreach roadmap is designed to be kind of like a guide or framework that entities can use to simply put in their information and have a ready-made outreach campaign, or they can use any of the resources that are within it to kind of pull from that and fit into their already created campaign as well. Also on the website, you will find links to resources that H-GAC and partner programs throughout the region have developed that relate to those different topics from the Coastal Communities messages. You'll find links to different ordinances that have been created, for example, pet waste ordinances in cities. If that is something that a city is interested in looking into, they can see what other cities have created. And we also try and put links to funding, training, and meeting opportunities that relate to water quality that we're aware of, so that this kind of serves as one place where people can go to try and not have to reinvent the wheel on outreach campaigns, but instead just kind of find what they need all in one spot. This is hopefully to help communities better implement some of those outreach and education measures that are often recommended as part of watershed-based plans, but several communities, especially smaller communities with limited staff and resources, often have harder times implementing. So the Coastal Communities, as its name suggests, is mostly focused on reaching out to smaller communities within our coastal counties. However, everything that is on the Coastal Communities website is available for any entity to use if it fits into and helps their outreach efforts. As I mentioned, a big part of the resources on coastal communities are the outreach roadmap and its messaging, the graphics that have been created. They focus on behaviors that can either help or help improve or add bacteria loads to local waterways, depending on how the residents do them. So behaviors that were of particular interest to cities were the proper disposal of pet waste, the proper disposal of fats, oils, and grease, litter and illegal dumping, and the maintenance of on-site sewage facilities, or OSSFs. As part of the outreach roadmap and its messages, you can see 4 of the example graphics that have been created on the screen, but each different topic actually has multiple graphics to choose from, different designs, and also designs for behaviors and topics that are related, such as wipes in the pipes. So there are a full year's worth of messaging that has been developed if a city were to use 2 different messages a month. There's also, as part of the roadmap, a calendar that suggests when certain topics might be more relevant, when they might hit home a little better for residents. And so again, just like with the roadmap, that's something where cities can simply pull it off the website, plug and chug it into their campaign, or they can take what they would like and use it however and whenever throughout the year best suits their needs. Each of these graphics that's been created is available in 4 formats for downloading. Those can be used either digitally, such as the social media graphic on the left or the website banner on the right. And then in the middle, you also have options for for print messaging. That's an 8.5 by 11-inch flyer, and then a bill insert that is about 1/3 of a page in size. Some of the graphics are already made into 3 copies per page for easy printing, whereas others, like this wipes in the pipes messaging, are just the graphic scaled to that size. And again, this allows for cities to decide how to use what they need. I've even had some cities say that instead of printing the 8.5 by 11, they prefer to print the bill inserts and pass those out at events. Kind of one of the ways that you can use these resources, not necessarily exactly how they were laid out, but the way that best fits your goals. Each of these messages can also be customized for cities. So here in this example, the city of Bay City added their logo to the graphic itself, and then they put their hashtags and their pertinent information in a social media post. So this is welcome. All cities are welcome to do that when they download the materials, and in some instances, we're able to help if you may not have that capacity to add logos to it. And if you prefer to just use the graphics as they come, you can also add just your specific information in social media posts like these examples from the city of Manville. If you are interested in using these roadmap messages and the roadmap itself, but you may not have necessarily staff who are as comfortable with the topics, so that they wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable putting together social media posts or even newsletters on their own, we are currently working on example content for both social media posts and newsletters, as well as additional messaging and images that were suggested through discussions with other cities this year. So those will soon be up on the website so that once again, you can either use them as they come and simply put your message out using all of the examples that have been provided, or as with everything else, just take what will fit into your outreach campaign and use it as you will. So we are also working on resources that are a little different. Instead of being more general, these are specific to apartment complexes and renters. And these are messages that address fats, oils, and grease disposal, specifically in apartment complexes and rental properties. This was a big concern for a lot of the communities we spoke with. So we started a community-based social marketing pilot project, and we've been working with project partners and communities to develop that. And once all of these resources are completed, they will be added to the Coastal Communities website and available just like everything else on there for communities to use. In addition to the digital materials we have available for download, we also have several displays that are available physically as part of a loan out program that we have. Now, all of the posters that I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides are also available in digital format on the website if you're interested in using them that way, but they are available in person as well if you'd like to check them out and use them at events, at workshops, in classrooms, for things like that. Most of these posters that you'll see are also available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. There's one set that is not, and we're currently working to get that one added as well. You'll see that on the screen, the one that is not currently available in the other languages. I want to run through a couple of these displays that we have. Unlike the posters that you just saw on your screen, 4 of our displays actually also come with an interactive component, kind of like a game, not necessarily prizes involved, but it's kind of more of an interactive exhibit. And I want to walk through those briefly. For those of you who are here in person, we have them actually in the back of the room for you to check out later if you're interested. But the first is Pitch the Poop. And this game comes with a A-frame sandwich board and a small trash can. And participants actually practice picking up pet waste made out of Play-Doh with pet waste bags. And it's then just a regular tossing game into the trash can while you provide information from the poster. But as you'll see, the 4 of these games that actually have interactive exhibits also have a pledge that participants, especially younger participants, can take related to that behavior you're trying to reinforce. Our other handheld interactive exhibit is our Grease Monster game. This is the Don't Feed the Grease Monster game, as you can see in the display there. The display is a small tabletop item. It has 3 tubes going down the center of it. One is completely clear, one is partially blocked with foam, and one has a complete blockage representing, of course, the clogs that can happen with improper fats, oils, and grease disposal. Participants take blue marbles that represent water. They'll drop them down into the pipes. And once all of the marbles have been dropped, you can actually remove that front artwork, talk about the clogs, and what happens when certain items get dropped down the drain. This game is actually designed with artwork and messaging that coincides with the Cease the Grease campaign, which is run regionally here by the Galveston Bay Foundation, so that when participants see that messaging later on, they can tie the 2 together. We also have a low impact development display. We call it Turn Your Yard into a Sponge. This display is broken up into 3 yards, which kind of look like the graphic displayed on the pledge here. And there are 3 materials you can put on each yard. One is just a plastic rubber material, a black rubber material. One is that green scraper part of a sponge, and one is an actual complete sponge. Participants can then pour water along the top of the display, simulating a rainstorm, and you can discuss how different grasses, different techniques that you might use in your yard can actually help reduce runoff. They can absorb water and reduce the pollution that gets carried away into our waterways and storm drains after rainfall events. And our newest game is our Fish Me from the Watershed game. So this game actually discusses litter in our waterways and all of the different ways you can prevent it from getting there in the first place. So participants use magnetic fishing poles to fish common litter items out of the box that represents the waterway. These include items like plastic water bottles, plastic straws, cigarette butts, tires, things like that. And then they actually take those items and place them on the poster. So the poster, you'll notice, has black stripes around it. Those are magnetic strips. and they can place the items where they think it should have gone in order to not become litter in the first place. Those include in the trash can, reducing or reusing the item, and an option to recycle. You might be able to see it might be a little small, but recycle also is broken down further into recycling at home through a curbside program, recycling at a recycle center, at retailers, or a household hazardous waste facility. This allows you, especially for some of the older participants, to talk about not only reducing and reusing to help reduce the generation of waste, but also recycling right when you do recycle items. In addition to these 4 displays and that set of 3 posters, the Loan Out program we have also has an Enviroscape available. That's a model that you can use to help discuss non-point source pollution. And we have all of the materials and a lesson plan for a lesson we call Freddy the Fish, which is another non-point source pollution lesson that is probably geared more towards the 2nd through 4th grade level, but it's a lot of fun for them. So we have all of these items available. They're really easy to check out. You just send me an email, which I'll have posted a little later on, and we schedule a time for you to come pick up those items. As a note, though, all of these displays are used at the annual River Lakes Bays and Bayous Trash Bash as part of an educational component. So we don't currently loan these out during the month of March because Trash Bash is held at the end of March every year. And if you do have them checked out, we usually ask that you return them by the beginning of March, just so we can make sure that none of the items need to be repaired and all of the pieces are still there. Other than that, we would love to get these out and used throughout the Galveston Bay watershed all year long. In addition to the digital and physical items through the Loan Out program, through the Coastal Communities Project, we also have 2 programs that H-GAC partners with that might be of interest to helping you recruit volunteers for different water quality related projects in your community. The first is Trash Free Texas. So like the Coastal Communities, it has its own website, www.trashfreetexas.org. And the goal of Trash Free Texas is to help connect volunteers to places in need of routine litter cleanup. It's a trash-free waters project from the EPA, and we're partnering with the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment and the North Central Texas Council of Governments to help promote these in our different regions. The website itself houses a variety of resources for litter-related volunteer engagement, including the Adopt a Spot map, which I'll talk about in a second, a partner packet for Adopt a Spot partners, and several toolkits for outreach and engagement related to litter cleanups. The Community Challenge Cleanup Toolkit includes information for planning and implementing community challenges or mayor challenges. If that is an interest, if that is a way you're interested in expanding your litter cleanup programs. It also has an outreach and education toolkit for local governments based on litter. And coming soon, it will also have a recreational toolkit for litter cleanups. Those are related to kind of the new phenomenon of plugging, flaking, plattling, basically picking up litter while you do some kind of recreational activity. So all of those are housed on the Trash Free Texas website, which again includes the Adopt a Spot map, kind of as the highlight of the program. Now, the Adopt a Spot map was designed to be a single streamlined location where volunteers from across the state can go to find spots in their local community that they can adopt and help keep clean of litter. It does not come with any guidelines based on that cities have to follow for their programs. So it merely just tries to connect volunteers to those opportunities for litter cleanup, which allows cities and other entities to maintain control of their program and coordinate with volunteers themselves without having to develop or maintain some kind of interactive platform like this map. It also comes with a partner packet of resources that help with promotion of the Adopt a Spot program. So you can let them know to go check out the website and find your maps that way. So without having to develop or maintain either of these resources, it allows communities, especially smaller communities who are interested, a little boost in being able to start an Adopt a Spot program. However, you might have noticed while the DFW area has quite a few spots, that is where the program started. Down here in the Houston-Galveston area, there are not quite as many spots. We know it doesn't necessarily reflect all of the great litter cleanup efforts that are currently going on, or that cities might be interested in starting. So if you are interested in the Trash Free Texas Adopt a Spot program, we would love to talk to you about that. And then finally, H-GAC has been a Texas Stream Team partner since 1992. The Texas Stream Team is a citizen science water quality monitoring program where volunteer monitors are trained through 3 phases of training to follow specific protocols and guidance so that their data is quality assured. It is part of a statewide program that is run by the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment, and we coordinate the regional group here along with some local partners. Volunteers, once they are trained, choose a local spot in their community and they monitor there once a month. This not only creates a great database and a data set for that site, which helps determine what the water quality is like at that location. It creates monitors who can be ambassadors of that site. They're familiar with it, they see it once a month, and they can more easily recognize or help identify when potential issues might pop up with water quality. So this is a really great program to get people out, to get them engaged with water quality and get some eyes on those waterways. So H-GAC's Texas Stream Team program did postpone trainings starting at the onset of COVID, but we are very excited to be resuming trainings now. We're looking forward to getting more citizen scientists trained in our region, replenishing some of our sites that have gone inactive, and just getting more people out on our waterways. If you are interested in any of these programs and how these resources might be of use to your goals in your community, please feel free to reach out to me either at the phone number and email listed on the left side, or if you go to some of those specific websites I mentioned, most of those email addresses will also lead you back to me. So I would be happy to talk with you. I think we have time for questions. If anyone has questions over the H-GAC resources. Should I stop sharing?
If you're online and you have a question, we can put it in chat or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. I think that's about what you were about to say, right, Kendall?
It was, but thank you, Andrea. You're on top of it. All right. Well, if y'all have any questions, I know we're going to have a discussion later, and I'm sure you can ask them then. Till then, I will turn it back over to Rachel.
Well, thank you, Kendall. Let me go ahead and stop this share. So Kendall just shared with us, some of the things that H-GAC can provide to help with outreach and education in the region. And now I want to highlight one of our kind of superstars in the region, Terry Macarthur with the Woodlands Township is going to share a little bit about her work as well. Slides here at the presentation. Live. Thank you. Thank you.
So Andrea, are you sending my notes file to all those who are online? And for those in the room, if you didn't notice, back here on this table are my notes. So you don't have to write so many notes if you want to pick them up.
Terry, your notes are in the chat for anyone who would like to download them.
Thank you so much. Just save you from scribbling too much if you want to make any notes. So if you're looking at those notes, you might notice that one of the first things I mentioned is all the different ways and different reasons that people have for volunteering. And let's face it, none of us has the funding on our own to run any of these really terrific programs like Kendall just talked about without the help of volunteers. So how do you get them and how do you keep them? And what do you have to do to make them feel really good about what they're doing? So all these are such terrific programs that Kendall just talked about, and yet their success depends on people showing up to help. So some of those questions I asked about what motivates you, for those of you in the room, do any of you actually volunteer with any organization? Yeah. So when you look at this series of questions about why people volunteer, do any of them resonate with you? I mean, do you recognize yourself in any of those questions? And then look at the second set of questions about the organization. So think about the organization that you volunteer with and try to figure out whether there's some reason that might match any of these given by lots and lots of volunteers on various surveys as why they volunteer with that organization and why they stay with that organization. So it's about having a good message. It's about talking about values that matter to your volunteers. It's about making them feel as though they're part of something going on. Kendall mentioned citizen science programs, and that's such a huge part of it. Andrea, did you send the link to that research article that we have printed out here in the room? Is that in the chat box as well?
The one you wrote or the one that Christina Lopez wrote?
The one that Lopez wrote, yes. Is that link in there for them?
Almost.
So this was a really interesting research project that was done. And coincidentally, it happened to be a bunch of volunteers who monitor water quality in Texas. So kind of makes you wonder if it was a stream team program somewhere or some other volunteer water monitoring program. But they identified lots of reasons why people volunteer to begin with, but how they choose the organizations they volunteer with. So I think if you would consider downloading that article that Andrea has put in the chat window for you to take a look at and actually spend some time with it, read it and see what motivates volunteers. So here are on the screen some of our numbers from Woodlands Township. Environmental services covers quite a few different kinds of projects, not just water related. So you can take a look there. In the top one are year by year, how many classes we had in each category, how many total people attended. And so we've been doing a lot of online presentations, classes. Everybody has. So this is exciting that we're kind of back in person, partially back in person. We'll take what we can get. But so we had quite a few classes with a significant number of folks who showed up for water conservation. But most of them asked those people who attended to take an action. So if you work with volunteers or try to recruit volunteers, you already know that just giving them information isn't enough. They'll never take action just because they're more aware. Yes, it's important for them to understand the whys, but that's not what leads them to taking action. So when we ask people to volunteer, we try to follow some other guidelines that are in my notes down below about making sure they know when they're invited to attend something that they're going to be asked to volunteer as part of it. And really, aren't the best training classes the ones that lead you directly into a volunteer project? So you can participate, so you can help your community, so you can help the environment, so you can have a feel-good opportunity to work with other people who find the same things you do important. So that's the approach we've taken. And it was interesting to me that Kendall mentioned the FOG program is based on community-based social marketing techniques. That's something our department has spent the last 2 years studying and adapting our messaging to match, because it is such a powerful tool. So if you haven't within your organization taken a look at community-based social marketing, that's something that I would strongly urge you to take a look at. But we ask them, when we invite them, we advertise classes as trainings for volunteers. So they know they're going to get asked to volunteer. That may keep a few folks from coming who would be just interested in knowing more on the topic. But overall, the number of people who arrive ready to volunteer is much, much greater that way. So if you look at the bottom half of this chart that's up here, this was 2021 at the last year that these numbers, but for watershed project hours alone in 2021, 111 people volunteered and spent 518 hours. 2021 was a tough year. I mean, we launched this program in 2020 in the middle of March and then went home. And so starting midway through 2021, we were thrilled and pleased to see this number. If you look to the left side, you look at our 2022 stats, and those are just the first few months through April. So the number of volunteers grew, the number of hours grew, and there's some other specific stats there that relate to particular elements of what we call the Watershed Project as a Woodlands Township Environmental Services Project. So if you've been involved in water at all, you know over the past few years, H-GAC has led various groups into stakeholder planning meetings for some of the watersheds around in this region. So it's been a couple of years ago now that Rachel, in fact, announced that the Spring Creek Watershed Protection Plan meetings were going to begin. And I've told this story before. I mean, as soon as that was announced, I've kind of preached about high bacteria levels in our township waterways for a while. I started talking about dog poop in earnest. I mean, everywhere I went, I talked about dog poop after that, in preparation for the eventuality that our watershed protection plan would get approved and we would be ready to implement some voluntary and volunteer-led activities to help reduce that level of bacteria within our township. So Spring Creek is a big watershed and lots of tributaries feed into Spring Creek. So within our little community, we can't really make huge differences in Spring Creek, but we surely could make differences within our township waterways. Bacteria is a 100% solvable problem. Pick up dog's poop and put it in the trash. Don't leave it bagged on the trail. Don't bag it and hang it on a tree limb. You know, Pet Waste Ferry does not make that route. So picking it up is step one of a two-step process. That poop has to go in the trash for us to clean up our waterways. So if you'll notice, it references a number of drains marked. Well, that's these cute little drain markers that you'll see if you picked up one of the door hangers in the back. There's a photo of how it looks applied onto a storm drain inlet. It's a variation of that longstanding SWIM program, Stormwater Inlet Marking Program. And so we started having meetings at parks within the township. Come out, hear about the problems we have in our waterways, our own waterways, not the bigger whole watershed, our waterways. Hear about some of the problems we have and find out how you can get involved. And I would take maps that I created for neighborhoods right around the parks. I'd take the markers themselves, and I would take door hangers that talk about not just pet waste, but they also talk about yard debris and lawn chemicals as problems in our waterways, because in the township, some of our waterways are listed of concern as fish habitat because of low DO. So all of these things come together as part of the program. I always carry my fake dog poop with me and usually put it on the table while I'm talking, and people will walk up and then jump back. Eventually, most of them end up asking, can I touch it? Sure, go ahead and touch it. But it's about reaching out and talking to people about values that matter to them. When they know that our waterways have issues in them that make it unhealthy for them to swim in that water or fish in that water and get it on their hands, especially any chance of taking a child who might fall and swallow some, that matters to them. They want their community and their family to be healthy. So talking to them about their values really encourages their participation. So that's where we've ended up from January through April with 168 volunteers. They've spent over 1,000 hours. They've already installed, well, this is only through April. We're pressing 3,500 drains marked now. Of course, throughout the township, we have 14,000 drains to mark. So we have a long way to go. But we've also put out closer to 7,000 of the door hangers on people's doors. And H-GAC was wonderful to initially give us some of the please pick up my dog poop waste bag dispensers. But when we ran through those, we had ordered more that look like this, and they say bag it and trash it. And I ordered carabiners that say bag it and trash it. And our community relations department developed this oh so cute rack card that says be a doggy do, not a doggy don't. And so we put this all together in a package. And when folks come out to the park and say, well, what could I do right now? I'll hand them a bag full of these and say, why don't you walk around the park, find people who have dogs and give them one of these. Don't ask them if they pick up after their dog. Don't imply that they don't, but rather approach them and just say, may I give you one of these for your dog's leash? And here's what I tell them. Put this on the handle of the dog's leash. Here are your bags in case you need them. But because it's this cool carabiner, you can put a plastic grocery bag right there with it. And as you use the bags, fill them up, tie them up, drop them into the grocery bag. It's on the handle of the dog's leash. Let the dog carry his own poop home. And then all you have to do is tie up that bag and throw it in the trash. Or if you pass a trash can on the way going out of the park or off the pathway, throw it away there. So these talks in the parks about water quality have grown to the point where volunteers will reach out to me and say, hey, I can't make that date, but I want to do that. I live in this neighborhood. Can I come pick up the kit or the supplies and do just my own neighborhood on my own? So that's one reason why the program just keeps growing and growing, is that we offer the opportunity for people to do this work more or less on their own. They tell me what street they live on. I make them a map right of their neighborhood. I give them an idea of what kind of time commitment it would take for them to reach all the drains that are in their neighborhood, or put hangers on all the doors in their neighborhood. So it's easy for them to make the commitment and to do the work. I feel good about the direction we're headed, and yes, we have a long way to go, but the volunteers just keep coming. The numbers just keep growing, and we keep doing more and more work. Here are some of the images from our programs. So we have, through April, we had 153 people who had registered to help with drain marking. That number from the earlier slide includes some of the folks who had registered to become certified Texas water specialists, which you also see the number there for. So that's a program you may be familiar with. It's a Texas Parks and Wildlife program. It's an actual certification program. It requires 8 hours of training based on information in the Texas Waters Curriculum Guide, easily found on the TPWD website. Certification is a really nice certificate from Texas Parks and Wildlife, and they even send you a real cool pin that says you're a certified Texas water specialist. But it's a little difficult for anyone who's not yet 18 to sign up for that program and participate. So in cooperation with Texas Parks and Wildlife, our department and the township are now approved by TPWD so that we can run these classes right there within the township. So especially for high schoolers, we've targeted them, grades 9 through 12, who are not yet 18. And so you see there are 72 people who have registered with the township, not with TPWD, with us, to become certified Texas water specialists. And all but about a dozen or 15 of those 72 are students in grades 9 through 12. I mean, high school and college students are a demographic that is just exploding in the volunteering world. They are more and more having to prove activity for school credits, and think how good it looks on their college application resume when they can say, I got certified by Texas Parks and Wildlife as a waters specialist. And look, I've got these volunteering hours to show how committed I was to doing that work. I mean, what a boon for anyone who's trying to engage volunteers in water-related activities. So in this slide you're looking at, starting from top left, that's one of our talks in the parks, and a young high school student is demonstrating how the carabiners work on the dog's leash. The next one to the right, if we're working kind of clockwise, is a private school. A group of their students wanted to get involved and asked if they could put down storm drain markers. So I said, sure, as long as the teachers and some adults, some parents are along with you. So this whole group of elementary school students from this private school went out and marked all the drains in the area, in the neighborhood that's nearest their school. They have since done other projects that are water related with me, and we've had a great time. Far to the right is a sample of a flyer that I put out that shows different dates that were coming up. We've kind of finished with park talks for the summer because it is so hot out there, but we'll take them up and start doing that again in the fall because it's a great model. If you have a location, you can bring people out that have neighborhoods right near it. It's a great way to engage them and taking some action right there in that neighborhood. So the two young men are more of the high school students or who are working for their water specialist certification. They helped put down drain markers, and then they went back through the neighborhood after the drain markers were down and put the information cards on people's door. The bottom photo there is of a group of those high school students attending one of our water labs. We typically have 3 to 4 hour water labs that we talk about water quality, water conservation, local water issues, make them aware. It's so important to engage youth because when they go home, they're going to talk about it to their parents. Even the high schoolers, those who still speak to their parents, are going to talk to them about what they learned that day. So it's a great way to reach them. There in the center is another volunteer who's not a teen, as you might guess from his appearance, but he and several others marked a really large neighborhood. I mean, a very large neighborhood. Right below that, another aspect we've started including in our workday, volunteer work days is, Kendall mentioned it, it's part of Keep Texas Beautiful's Trash-Free Texas program called Trash-Free Waters. And so we work with KTB to run what they call their STOP program. So this group that you see here we met at the park, we went to the nearby waterway, they picked up trash and litter, and then we spent about an hour and a half, we dumped it all out on tarps and sorted it. It's really a terrific citizen science program. It's not just about feeling good that you picked up trash. It's really turns out data that is helpful to figure out what's going on. When we helped pilot this program for KTB last summer, and we picked up litter behind a long strip shopping center. And one of the interesting things that came out of it was a bunch of tiny toy-like things and children's drink things that were picked up all in one area, but it was a lot of them. And it turned out the front side of that building was the entrance into a daycare center. So data like that puts you in a position to understand what could lead to trash and litter of a specific kind. You can go and make a friendly visit and say, hey, how could we help you not let this litter get away and it ends up out here in the green space. To the left of that is another part of the water lab. We collected water samples, went back into the building where we were meeting that day for the lab, and the picture two to the right of that table where they're doing a chemical test of water. This was the sample water that was collected for the dissolved oxygen test. The one right above it is another date that we did the same thing with other students who are testing the water. As we meet for the panel here in a few minutes, I brought along one of the vests. That's an image of it that says volunteer. Some of the kids in the photo here and there are wearing t-shirts that say they're Watershed Project volunteers. So that's kind of some of the projects and programs that we do in the township. And if you take a look at my notes, I've tried to give you information about how we set them up and how they run. So Andrea, are there any questions for me?
Not yet, but as a reminder, if you have questions, please type them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute.
Okay, I'm not seeing the number on the chat window increase, so I'm assuming there are no questions, so thank you for your time. If you look at my notes, my phone number and email address are on those notes. I would welcome your questions. Thank you.
Well, Terry, there's a question that's in the chat now that's probably going to be a question that sounds like a good one to start out with the panel, but it's how do you reach volunteer groups?
Okay, shall we hold that for the panel?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that is a good question. We will hold it for the panel. Stop. Okay, so at this point in the presentation, we're lucky enough to be joined by Matthew Abernathy of the Galveston Bay Estuary Program and Karistan Katusin of the Bayou Land Conservancy, who I think is joining us on the phone. They'll be joining Kendall and Terry for kind of a Q&A panel. So before we get started with the questions, I just wanted to ask if Matthew or Karistan, if you'd like to give a little bit more background about yourself, introduce yourself to the audience.
Matt, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You go right ahead, Karistan. I'll follow you.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm on the phone, everyone. My power went out like 10 minutes ago, so that's where I'm at. My name is Karistan. I work for the Bayou Land Conservancy. I am our community conservation manager. I specifically do all of our education, outreach, fun stuff like that. I also teach at Lone Star. And I formerly worked for the county. So that's just, I guess, a little bit about me. And I'm super excited to see the questions you guys have. So thanks for having me.
All right, I'll go ahead and follow Karistan on that. My name is Matthew Abernathy, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Galveston Bay Estuary Program. I'm in charge of getting out and basically teaching people about the estuary and the watershed. And this is actually a pretty new program for our organization. And so I'm having the opportunity to build an education and outreach program from the ground up. Prior to this, I've worked for Harris County, Houston Parks and Recreation, and Galveston Bay Foundation, doing a variety of education, outreach, and conservation programs.
Now we're live. Okay, thank you, Matt. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and jump into the panel. We have some prepared questions, but I think we'll go ahead and kick it off by asking if there are any questions either in person or in the chat. And I think we had a really great one from the chat a second ago. So how do you reach volunteer groups? And I guess we'll give our online speakers a chance to answer first, and then we'll turn it over to those in the room.
Karistan, do you want to go ahead on this one?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I just can't. You guys can't see me looking at you. So how I personally reach volunteers through the Bayou Land Conservancy, we actually have quite a few designated volunteers that come out quite a bit. A lot of our volunteers are actually found on our trail, the Spring Creek Nature Trail. So we have different signage and trail crew members that are out. And a lot of times people just stop and ask us what we're doing. So that's one way, is just having folks on the trail. We have QR codes out there as well. And then our other big program that we have is our free adult education program called the Ambassador Program. We advertise for that on a variety of social media platforms, which helps get a variety of folks involved. Terry kind of touched on this as well. One of the big parts of my job is that we are really trying to get more underrepresented people, so youth, diverse backgrounds, military, single family households, things like that involved. And so for our education program, we actually try to do everything on weekends and try to offset as much as we can to minimize accessibility barriers. So those are kind of our two big things. I also am like a huge advocate through my friend groups. A lot of how we get heard about, at least for the Bayou Land Conservancy, if you don't live up this way, is by word of mouth. So the more people that know you or know your organization, the more likely you are to get more volunteers. Take it away, Matt.
All right, thank you. So I actually have a really interesting job in that my education and outreach is specifically to teach people about the Bay. And we currently don't offer any volunteer programs at the Estuary program. We support so many different organizations around the community. And so if you're actually looking to connect to volunteer groups or looking for organizations that might be looking for volunteers, I actually would be a pretty good resource for that, because part of my job is to know what organizations are doing in the community and try to find out who needs volunteers and direct people to them. Because as I do outreach programs and presentations, I'm kind of a stepping stone where I'm going to provide primary information on the estuary and the watershed and basic background, and then help connect interested parties to partners throughout the watershed region, trying to get them connected closer to their own backyard and be able to get out there. And so I'll go ahead and drop my email address in the chat, and feel free to connect with me after the workshop, and I'll be happy to try to help point you in the right direction of some organizations that might be looking for opportunities to volunteer.
Great, thanks, Matt. So same question to those in the room. How do you reach volunteer groups?
Well, I happen to notice from some of the names I can see who are attending today that some of my water nerd volunteers are actually online here. I wish we could hear from them what attracted them. But if you are in a county that has a Texas Master Naturalist chapter in it, that is a wonderful resource for volunteers. If you're not familiar with the Master Naturalist program, you should get acquainted with it. So these are folks who are willing to make a commitment to spend time in training classes to learn some basic information on a wide variety of natural resources right in their region, right in their local area. For example, out in our Master Naturalist chapter in Montgomery County, we spend virtually no time studying saltwater ecosystems because we're that far inland. And so, you know, it's going to be very locally sourced information. So part of their commitment as Master Naturalists is to put in a minimum of 40 hours of volunteer service a year that's related to some aspect of natural resource protection or management. So they're an ideal place to start. Seek out those Master Naturalists in your county or in a nearby county. In the township, our department writes a minimum of one blog a week on some local environmental information or issue or event. And so at least once a month, I have something about water in the blog. We're very fortunate that the township funds a magazine that carries environmental information and other important announcements to our residents, and it goes to every single mailbox in the township. So our department submits articles for that. We also do the typical social media stuff. There are Facebook posts, email blasts, and it's interesting to me that although probably I would guess off the top of my head, 25% of the folks who see the marketing messaging that we put out are not township residents. They still volunteer too. They're willing to come into the Woodlands Township to do some volunteering if they buy into the messaging that we're sending out. And then what happens is someone volunteers, they come and spend a couple of hours in the morning learning about something. Then we go out and we take some important action in their mind that matches up with their values of what they want the environment to look like where they live. When you learn something new, the first thing you want to do is tell somebody about it. They go home and they say, honey, did you know? And guess what I spent 2 hours doing this morning? I went out. So volunteers are like that old, well, probably no one here is old enough to remember them, but old commercials that used to be on TV. I think it was a hair care product that said, you use it and you tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends and the number just grows. That's how volunteering goes. If you're an organization that is well organized, is careful about your communication to all your volunteers, make sure everyone is recognized and appreciated. Follow some of those guidelines that I gave you that we follow. If you looked at my notes pages already, be that organization that fulfills some of their needs, some of their personal desires to help the environment or help their community or share things with others who think like them. And volunteers will come up. People call me and say, hey, my neighbor told me about this. So it works, But I strongly suggest if there's a Master Naturalist chapter near you, start with them. What a wonderful core of volunteers they are.
Yes, and I don't think I have too much more to add. I think the other panelists have covered it pretty well, but I would just like to reiterate several points that they've brought up. Most of our programs that I mentioned are really just helping communities get what they need, but with the Texas Stream team, we do recruit volunteers, we do engage them. And one of the biggest ways we do that, we do the same channels. We put out a newsletter, we have a website occasionally, and the Meadows Center for the statewide program promotes it on social media and things like that. And a large portion of our volunteers are Texas Master Naturalists. But I would say the biggest way we get new people is that they run into a stream team monitor when they're out monitoring and they say, what are you doing? So it doesn't have to be the Texas Stream team, but if you provide, as Terry was saying, if you provide these volunteer activities that engage your volunteers, you get them interested. And especially if it's something where they get out into your community doing it, where they'll run into other people and they feel comfortable enough with it, you've given them the background, the information to talk on. Even if you don't have an ambassador program, you are creating ambassadors with your current volunteers, and that can really help people find you. It's not just something that, they go home and tell their family, it's people coming up to them in the field and they feel good about what they're doing, so they share it with someone else. So I think that can be more than any social media posts or any newsletters. Getting it straight from the volunteer who's out there doing it, that they're enjoying it, is the best way to get people to come check out your program.
All right, those were some great answers. So we'll go ahead and move on. Are there any more questions that people would like to ask in the chat or in the room before we move on to kind of our question bank?
Well, Rachel, there's not, but I did want to follow up that the person who initially asked about how to reach volunteers had a specific need, and it's going to reach out to Matthew after, I believe is what they're saying before they left. And also Charlotte Cisneros from, I want to say, Galveston Bay Foundation offered some tips in the chat for how they reach volunteers. I can read them out for you. I'm sure that everyone online can also read them, but I'll let you know that she said that she'll second reaching out to Master Naturalists. They also work with a lot of scout troops, especially Eagle Scouts, school groups, corporate groups, churches. And in general, it's a good idea to have a variety of types of opportunities, like different times of days, different times of the week, different physical levels of physical effort, which helps ensure that there are things to do for any skill set and availability or interest level, so the volunteers have something to do once they volunteer.
That is great. All right. Seeing no more questions, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to our bank. So I have a pretty sassy one lined up for the first question. So I'm sure a lot of people would like to know, how are your projects funded? Or how do you seek out, continued funding to keep these programs running? So again, we'll start with our online guests.
For the Bayou Land Conservancy, so a lot of our projects, what we focus in is conservation easements. So we have a variety of funding sources, including grants, donors, board members, and then we just have, like myself, before I worked at the BLC, is just a monthly donor. So we have a plethora of funding in terms of our programming. We have a lot of things that go through grants, but like our ambassador program typically has an underwriter, or our Brews and Bayous, where we celebrate our volunteers, typically also has a sponsor or an underwriter of that source. Due to the nature of the beast working in an NPO, we really try to minimize spending exorbitant amounts of money in any way. So we don't, a lot of our programs are usually sponsored. We do put on individual events. If people ever want to lead a hike or anything of that nature, we tell them they're more than welcome to charge. We have had a forest therapy guide come out. She's done free ones and paid ones, because we do want to acknowledge that anyone that's willing to give their time to the BLC should be compensated in some way. So that's the BLC. We run the gambit, really, of different means.
So I'll go ahead and follow that up with saying that I am incredibly lucky that I work for a program of a state agency. And so my program is funded, but for those that are not familiar with the Galveston Bay Estuary program, as part of the National Estuaries program, we actually provide funding for different projects that promote our mission, which is to preserve Galveston Bay for generations to come. And so I'll also put our website on the chat and make sure that that can get out to everybody. But we have 4 major priority areas. One is natural resource uses. So that's land management and conservation. We have water and sediment quality. We have monitoring and research, and then we have public participation and education. And each one of those subcommittees is actually at the end of this month going to be opening up for proposals to be submitted. And on our website is going to have the information for the different priorities of our action plans that we're going to be looking for. And so interested parties can get more information from the website. I saw Andrea just posted it in the chat, so thank you for that. And you're welcome to take a look. And if you think that you, as an organization or potentially a partnership, have a project that would fit one of those priority areas, I would encourage you to submit a proposal, and we might be able to actually help some of these local communities and organizations by funding projects like that.
That's great, great opportunity. All right, same question for those in the room.
Well, I'm also fortunate that I work for local government, so I have budget. I get to buy cool pet waste bag dispensers and give them away. But we also do some other projects that are really specific. And for those, we partner with a local nonprofit. So if you have a nonprofit partner who can appeal to local businesses, organizations that are in the general area where you are, nothing wrong with appealing to them to ask if they would like to make a donation to the nonprofit partner that you have, so that you can collaborate with them to make things happen. Going back to the Master Naturalist program, sometimes the biggest expense trying to put on a program is getting the work done. For the storm drain marking project there in the township, because we're a township, there are 11 MUDs that operate within our boundaries or within our community. And so when we approached them and said, hey, we think this is a worthwhile project, and if you'll buy the markers, we'll be willing to recruit, train, and deploy the volunteers to get them put down. And that's exactly how it turned out. All 11 MUDs kicked in the money. They purchased the markers and the adhesive, and we recruit the volunteers to get the work done. So the more collaborations involved, actually the better for program outcomes, because everyone feels as though they have a part in making this good thing happen. So reach out, find partners, find other organizations who can work with you and you can work with them. As I said, I'm fortunate that I have budget, but not everybody does.
Yes, and I would second the partnerships. So for the Texas Stream Team, we are fortunate that our Clean Rivers program helps fund a lot of the costs for our volunteers for that program here in our region. But for other programs, including the River Lakes Bays and Bayous Trash Bash, which we help coordinate, I know part of that, some of the supplies and other funding needed for specific sites oftentimes comes from community partners. For example, industry in a community, a lot of industries might have community giving programs, or they might be looking for opportunities where their volunteers can give back in the community. They really like to do that through volunteer activities where they're helping the environment or they're helping a specific part of their community. They can really share that with their employees. And if that's something you can provide through a volunteer event, like in our case, Trash Bash, but through several other volunteer opportunities, they might be willing to partner with that and perhaps do some cost sharing. So yeah, definitely make some inroads in your own community, see what industries might like to support your efforts. And again, not limited to industry, but any other kind of community partner who might benefit from that and like to have a hand in supporting those efforts is definitely not something to overlook.
And if I might add, the Keep Trash Free Texas and Trash Free Water, reach out to Keep Texas Beautiful.
So Keep Texas Beautiful, especially if you are doing a litter cleanup. If you're looking for help with funding for that, Keep Texas Beautiful affiliates. I'm not sure if they have to be affiliates or not, but I know they don't. So if you add your event to the Keep Texas Beautiful calendar, I know that you can request help with getting supplies for that cleanup, trash bags, gloves, and several other supplies. So if you're looking into litter cleanups, I would definitely check out Keep Texas Beautiful's website and see if that would be a resource to help with that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, our next question is, what age groups typically participate in volunteer activities? I know we've kind of touched on this with Terry and Kendall. And kind of a follow-up question is, how do you adjust your messaging for different age groups? So again, we'll start with the online folks.
So here at the Bayou Land Conservancy, we I will say our target audiences are usually folks that are, I don't know, I'd say 16 and over, although we definitely do things with younger people. I would say the folks that we most have as active participants are typically retired. We get a lot of people who are looking to finally follow their passion post-retirement. And so, like as Terry said, we have a lot of master naturalists as well involved in the BLC. There are different social media platforms that we try to utilize to get other folks interested. I think an underrepresented group, in at least for the BLC, is going to be young professionals. So people that have families, single parent homes, or even just single young adults are sometimes overlooked. And I know working in a nonprofit, we're usually looking for folks who are going to have a lifetime investment with us, whether that's through volunteering, donations, etc. To get the younger aged folks, pre-retirement, if you will, I try to offer, so I'm pretty new at the BLC. I've only been here a couple months. We try to do a variety. We're starting some new programming to try and get folks out on the trail, because our main aspect for us is the Spring Creek Nature Trail. 14 miles unpaved wilderness experience is how we like to tell people. And it's good for all ages, families, young adults, bikers, hikers, whoever is interested. So one of our programs we're starting this fall is our docent program, where we'll have folks on the trails just there to answer questions and to make sure that everyone's getting heard and seen on our trails. So I'm a big believer in face-to-face communication is the best way to get folks. Also for communities that are underrepresented or may not have access to internet, still doing the old-fashioned paper flyers and just getting out there and getting involved in their community and letting them know they are seen and heard is another really great way, and something I personally try to do here.
And I'll follow up on that. As far as age groups, as Kirsten mentioned earlier, it really depends on the program, the location, what you want them to do. You're not gonna go and have a group of elementary school children doing a 2-mile stretch of Adopt a Highway on Interstate 45. But if you have a group of elementary school children that wants to do a trash cleanup, there are ways to do it where it's safe and still beneficial, whether it's right around their schoolyard or at at the neighborhood park that happens to be right around the corner. And so I think a lot of that is just determining what projects you have and how it can safely and feasibly be done. And then the same really goes for tailoring it to specific age groups. One of the things that I've realized lately through some conversations is that, especially because of the pandemic over the last 2 years, we've become so engrossed in using digital media to get our presentations across, because that was the only option. And now that we're getting back to face-to-face, there still is a tendency to utilize that digital media. And as Kirsten said, face-to-face social interaction is really the best way to get this across. And so as far as presenting it, think about the fact that as an adult, even if you're sitting down and watching a presentation and it's 60 minutes of PowerPoint slides and reading those slides, it's hard to stay focused even as an adult. And so if you think about younger kids, they have very, very short attention spans. And so finding ways that instead of just trying to visually engage them, using hands-on activities, the resources that Kendall talked about with that are used for Trash Bash, those different games and activities can be a great icebreaker that take 10 to 15 minutes with a young age group who you're then engaging to go out and walk the trails and pick up litter or something like that. And so my suggestion to both of those questions is really take a minute to sit down and think about your audience and what the best way is to engage them, because those extra few minutes that you take to really think about it and apply to that program could be the difference between a volunteer who comes out one time and somebody who really understands that you've put an effort in to engage them and they really enjoyed themselves and become a repeat volunteer.
Great, thanks. All right, same question for those in the room.
Well, as you saw from that slide I showed you photos, we have a wide variety of age groups that participate. We reach school groups. We run a number of school programs in the township. So if you don't have some educational program you run in schools, either elementary to middle school or at the high school level, maybe think about how you could start something like that. Because once you've gone to a school and engaged those kids or brought them out for a field study somewhere on a water or some other topic, natural resource topic for them, on my notes, you'll see that one of the things that I try to keep in my mind all the time is how do you close the knowing, doing gap? And that's one way. It works with adults, but it works really well with kids. You spend some time to help educate kids about a topic that you can present at a level that they understand, but also that excites them and makes them want to, even at their age, help the environment, help the community, be someone who feels good about what they do. Going back to community-based social marketing, one of the main tenets of that is that once you ask someone to do something, to take an action, even if it's a small action, once they've accepted and taken that step, it's easier to ask them to take another step. It's easier for them to say yes to another step. And you build on what they've done to ask them to do more. And the same is true with adults and kids. So at one of the recent water labs, so that's for grades 9 to 12. So I worked through the science teachers in the high schools and asked them to post notices about the programs that we're going to run. And a lot of our high schoolers come from those programs, as well as through our nonprofit partner there in the township that also offers scholarships to high schoolers that are in our area. So from several different sources, we draw high school students in. And instead of demonstrating something about how a watershed works using the Enviroscape, which a high schooler might feel we were talking down to them using this tabletop model of how a watershed works, what we've started doing is saying, hey, you know what would really be a great leadership skill for you to develop that would look terrific on your resume when you start applying for college is if you tackled a few simple to learn ways to teach younger students. So you guys go to a younger student in a feeder school, or if you're in a private school that has several grade levels, that you learn these few things and you teach at a younger grade level, get involved and practice those leadership skills. So we took the Enviroscape and we said, here's what we do with fifth graders. Well, you know, when it comes to the part where you've got all these different things on the surface, on the land, and you give them all a spray bottle of water and they're making it rain, just like the fifth graders, they're spraying each other and they're having a good time. Make it fun. Even the adults love it. There were a couple of adults who said, oh my gosh, I never saw that demonstrated before. Can I borrow the Enviroscape and take it to my kids' class? So make it fun, switch it up, talk to the younger kids at a level that's appropriate for them, but don't talk down to them. So engaging all different age groups is really important because especially those younger kids, they take the message home, as I mentioned earlier, they take the message home. And so it's a great way to build your volunteer corps.
And I guess the only thing I might add is, you know, they've mentioned several great ways to engage potential volunteers, going through schools. Another activity is finding them on the trails. I would definitely go back to what Charlotte put in the chat, figuring out who, having a diverse range of volunteer opportunities. And then, as Matt mentioned, figuring out who those are for, who are you targeting for those activities, and then try and meet them where they're at. Don't necessarily just, throw social media posts out into the ether, but actually try and do face-to-face engagement. That does, really get people more involved. But you can add some kind of enticement in. For Trash Bash, for example, we know that historically we have a lot of scouting groups come. So we've gotten with our local scouting organizations, the councils, and we've asked, are there any badges or scouting patches that this activity would work towards? It may not get them that patch, but it would count toward it. So we advertise that, letting them know that they can come and do this activity, and it goes towards another goal they're working towards. You can also work, I love, doing 2-for-1. If you can get an education out there, if you can, have an education opportunity that also draws people into another event. If you're looking to recruit, families or young adults, maybe you go to a farmer's market or some other city event, some other local event where they might be. Maybe you can get a booth with something like one of our educational displays where you're talking about a topic, and then let them know that they can take a further action by volunteering for this upcoming event we have. So, you get to educate them, but if they're interested, you have another step for them to take. You can tell them right there. So just meeting your target audience where they are and letting them, kind of hooking them at that location and then bringing them into an event. So I think Matt has his hand raised.
Right, I see Matt's hand.
So I just wanted to follow up on all of this and let people know that it's also important when you're figuring out what your audience is, that it's okay to not have programs for certain age groups for 2 reasons. One is sometimes your program just isn't viable across the board. And the other thing is that volunteers are going to know if you just say, well, normally we only allow 16 and up, but if you want to bring 12, 10-year-olds, we'll make it work. They're going to be able to tell that you just kind of like threw something together and it's not, it's not as good as it should be or it could be for a group. And so to kind of piggyback on what Terry had mentioned earlier, that's where partnerships become so important, because yes, you want to get volunteers to come and support your programs and you want people to come see and support your programs. But if you can't, for whatever reason, work it into your program, knowing who your partners are in the area that could be a resource to help that organization, then you can refer them to other groups that may be able to help out with a specific age group or a specific project. So I guess just remember that it is okay if you can't accommodate everyone or do everything with a volunteer program.
That's great, and it actually feeds kind of nicely into our next question, which is how do you select event sites? What makes a good event site, and how does kind of equity and accessibility play into that? So we'll start with Kirsten.
Yeah. So in terms of site accessibility, availability, etc., as I said, the Bayou Land Conservancy, there is only 2 technically, but 1 larger, 2 properties that we own outright in fee. So we do not own the majority of the spaces that we use. Of course, the Spring Creek Nature Trail is along the Spring Creek, which is the township with Terry, but then it's also Harris County Precinct 3 and Montgomery County Precinct 3. So it is a balance of working with a lot of other government entities. For us, the primary programs we do, if folks are interested in trail work, we kind of go all over our properties, as we have quite a few different conservation easements on public land. For corporate groups, we have a couple spaces, one of which is over in Montgomery County. And then the Woodlands, there's trash pickups are always super, super huge. I will say one of the biggest issues we encounter with new volunteers and just new people to the Bayou Land Conservancy is that our accessibility has room for growth, is the best way to put that. We don't own any of our land, so we can't offer solutions in a lot of places. And the three main trailheads that we have on our nature trail are pretty popular, especially the one over in Creekside. So if you have access to a vehicle and you are, of driving age, you can access our trailheads. If you do not have access to a vehicle, regardless of age, it's really hard for you to get to our green spaces. One of the things that we're trying to figure out is how can we overcome those barriers, because the Spring Creek Nature Trail is 14 miles long. It goes from 45 in Rayford essentially over to Burroughs Park in Harris County Precinct 3. So there's a wide swath of people are able to get there. But we do have users that come all the way from Pearland or Humble, and it's not always easy. And a lot of our trailheads have coordinate locations more than anything else, which can be really, really tricky. So we're always looking for new ways to improve that. Unfortunately, there's no public transit or anything like that that goes near our trail. We're just so far north. But the county Precinct 3 does do some senior trips and some activities like that, and some of our lands, like 100-acre wood. So those are the kinds of, like Terry mentioned, and everyone has mentioned, doing those collaborations is the best way for a lot of our entities to work together. So just building on things like that, working with YMCA youth camps to get them to bus their kids out, things of that nature. We have a grant in the works to try and get some kids from Humble out to our preserves next summer so we can pay for everything. It really is, accessibility is something I think, unless you live near a green space, it can be an issue generally. Matt?
So I guess I'm just going to piggyback on what Karsten mentioned regarding partnerships and having the opportunity, or taking the opportunity, I should say, when you have somebody that reaches out to you for a project, to really discuss with them and find out exactly what their needs are. And once again, if you can't confidently and completely meet those, then don't try to cut corners or make excuses. Instead, reach out to other organizations, or think about ways in between that you could meet with them, potentially at a middle location where you can still use your resources and provide your expertise on a subject matter, but at a facility that is somewhere that's more accessible. And so, it may be that traditionally you may not spend a lot of time going and visiting schools, but you might be able to go to a school and utilize the schoolyard or areas around there to get the same information across that you would do on your own property. But it helps you to overcome that accessibility barrier. And so just making sure that you get to know the organizations and the resources that are around you and around this area. And I think meetings like this are a great way to do it, because we're all in this together. We may have, different primary goals, but ultimately in the end, we're all trying to do the same thing.
Great, thank you. Same question for you guys?
So again, it's really fortunate for the programs that I get to do, that there are more than 150 parks within the Woodlands Township. And it's a matter of, these are water programs we're talking about today. These are all water related programs we're talking. So it's also really fortunate that there are waterways and drainage channels and other appropriate detention, retention pond areas that are located near parks. So it's pretty easy actually for me to choose locations as the meeting points to talk about the program, have supplies there with me, disperse folks into the neighborhoods surrounding the parks to do some work. And so because the parks are already accessible, I don't really have to deal with that too much. And for folks who have some issues, they know their neighborhood. They're going to come to their neighborhood park when we're there. And maybe all they do is go on a door-to-door up and down the driveway sidewalks to put door hangers out. But however they want to participate matters to them that they can, and matters to us that they will. So I'm really quite fortunate in that respect, and for our water labs, we go to one of the two recreation centers, both of which have waterways that are right there at the recreation centers. So I reserve a room in the rec center proper, and we do our water studies at the waterway. So it's great.
And then I guess I would just maybe bring the question back to its most basic form and encourage you to think about what the real purpose of what you really need for your event, what its purpose is, what you need from the site. You know, we're looking at very different site criteria when we look for a Texas stream team monitoring site or training, which where, you know, we need classroom space, we need somewhere also nearby outdoors near the water, as opposed to a trash bash event where you're looking for somewhere with a lot of litter, where you also have parking for volunteers, and you know, we provide lunch and educational games. So, you know, having, like Terry said, a good meeting point at a park or somewhere nearby. So your event, depending on your outreach activity, might have very different criteria you need to consider. So make sure that location meets all of those. But it's also a good idea to be really familiar with the sites that are available in your community, because when you're talking about volunteers, making sure they have a good time, they enjoy it. You also want to think about that basic hierarchy of needs. You know, if your event's in the summer, you want to make sure that there's somewhere shady for them to be standing, if not air conditioned. Somewhere where, you know, just going to say bathrooms nearby are always a plus. So at its most basic form, I would make sure you have a good inventory of what is available in your community, so that when you are planning what each of your different opportunities needs, you kind of have an idea of where you can start. And then just remember that those ones that work the best tend to get filled up. So have some backup plans, and you know, some might be better than others, but maybe some other sites are a good second, and you just might have to bring, you know, a pop-up tent, something you can easily make a good site. But always keep in mind what that specific event needs and what will make it comfortable for volunteers, because they're just standing out there on an asphalt parking lot all day, they may not be returning. So just keep that in mind.
So it does require that you do planning, stay organized, and don't think you're going to put together something for next weekend. I mean, plan months in advance, especially if you are trying to reserve a space or a pavilion at a park or a room in a building. Plan it far enough in advance that you have a chance of getting the facility you want. I'm planning into February at the moment.
All right, thanks for those great answers. Okay, so this one's a little bit more vague, but I hope we get some fun answers. So what has surprised you, for better or worse, hopefully better, about working in outreach?
Man, great question. I can tell you as a geologist, that's my background. I love when I work with kids and they just ask me things like, and even adults actually, like, oh, man, like, how old are dinosaurs? Where can you find them? Do we have dinosaurs in Texas? And like, those are so fun, just because of my background. And then that gives me an opportunity to be like, whoa, you like dinosaurs? Did you know? And then tell them what our state Plexisaurus, that's our state dinosaur. How big do you think it is? It's actually one of the largest dinosaurs on the planet, and it's this whole educational opportunity to engage their interests in my interests. And I think everyone, whether you're on the phone, you're in the person, you can relate that if you have an interest, no matter how weird it is. Like, I've had kids bring me quartz pebbles and be like, look how cool. And I'm like, that is literally the ugliest rock I've ever seen. And if you find somebody who has an interest like you, or you can even appear to be the same level interested, like that is the it moment for me, the aha, like, this kid feels valued, this human feels valued, and you're sharing a special space together. So that's probably, I would say, outreach is phenomenal. I love it. I love talking to people. I love just getting to prod people slightly. Question like, oh, hey, you like biking? No? Oh my gosh, me either. I don't know how to bike, but do you like to walk? Because we have a trail you can walk on. There's all kinds of stuff. And it's true, I literally don't know how to ride a bike. So I don't even lie to them when they say that. So I guess, sometimes though it can be uncomfortable. As a geologist, I've gotten lots of weird questions as well, like all kinds of things. But I would say if you're doing outreach, even those people that like give you the side eye when they walk by your booth, like, oh, I don't know if I want to talk to them. Those are the people that it's really easy just for one moment, just to say, hey, like, I noticed blah, blah, blah. And it's connecting people. So I don't know. I just love connecting people to the earth and to their surroundings. And I just love it. I'm sure Matt will say something very passionate as well.
Well, thank you. I'll see what I can follow that with. But one of the things, I don't know if it's necessarily, sorry, my dog's barking in the background. I don't know if it's necessarily the most surprising, but I think what I enjoy most is when you indirectly or unintentionally change someone's perception. One of the things that I found in education and outreach is that if you go out and you're passionate about what you talk about and you know what you're going to say, then and you don't get this excessive pride where it's like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to change everybody's viewpoint to my viewpoint, because everybody is allowed to have their own viewpoint and perception. But especially in some of the programs that I do, I'm a snake guy. Not everybody likes snakes. I'm a volunteer hunter education instructor for Texas Parks and Wildlife. A lot of people have opinions about hunting and the ethics of that, and talking about those subjects. And at the beginning of programs, having people tell me that, I'm never going to change their mind about anything. And I can say, well, if you'll sit down, hopefully you'll learn something. And then those same visitors are the ones that come up after the program and say, I never knew that, or I really learned something today. And, realizing that I may not have changed the way that they look at a specific topic or subject matter, but the realization that I helped open their eyes and they learned a little something new and might think about things a little differently, I think is the most, I would say the most rewarding aspect of doing outreach, for me at least.
That's great. All right, Kendall and Terry, what has surprised you?
So back to community-based social marketing. We began moving a lot of our programs into the community. It's that be where the people are that you're trying to reach. Go to them, don't make them come to you. But the most surprising aspect of getting out there, being at the parks, talking to people, it's that combination of the random folks who come to see what you're doing, the random folks who want to engage as soon as they see what you're doing. But it's also about, you know, this marker in and of itself on a storm drain, its only purpose is to start a conversation. Really, its purpose is to start a conversation. And it, as part of that community-based social marketing process, one of the best ways that you often are encouraged to make a difference is to start the kind of conversations that lead to new social norms. So conversations that start when you talk to them about pet waste and you offer them a bag dispenser, or conversations that start when a volunteer is putting down a storm drain marker, or conversations that start in the parks while we're talking about water quality and blowing leaves into the storm drain inlet. The more people talk to people about the issues that exist, what they learned about them, which speaks to what Matt said, what they learned about the issues, and how relatively simple it is to take an action. It can be a small action, but to take some action at the personal, individual level, the more unacceptable it becomes socially in the community to not do those things. The more socially unacceptable it becomes to not pick up your dog's poop and put it in the trash. So I have found it remarkable how readily people are willing to talk to their circles of influence when they learn something that they can translate to teaching someone else. I mean, they become, as Kendall has said, they become our ambassadors. They become our advocates right there in their own neighborhood, whether we call them that or whether they take it on themselves. And those who really do become those stronger advocates as volunteers, they're the ones to target, to say, hey, would you like to take on a little bit more of a role? Would you like to be the neighborhood person who leads this and does that and organizes something else? Because the more they feel your recognition of their interest, skills, leadership abilities, the more they're willing to take on doing those things. They're who begin to lead groups on their own. So start the conversations. Don't get hung up on how many of these we put down. Really think more about how many conversations did we start. I've had volunteers tell me people will see them out there putting down a storm drain marker, and they'll come out of their house and say, what are you doing? And the conversation that goes on, you know, they come and they report to me, the householder said, I did not know that. Oh my gosh, I got to tell somebody, you know. So conversations, start conversations. That's what will surprise you. That's what will amaze you. That's what will make you so happy that you took the time to create a program that starts conversations.
Yeah, and I guess along with conversations, one of the things that surprises me a lot, and it still surprises me, is, you know, whether it's an education program, an outreach program, a volunteer event, is just how often you have to adapt. You know, the program you spend hours and hours working on, you think it'll get their engagement. make sure you know your script, make sure you know all that, but make sure you can pivot if that's not what their interest is. Because whether it's interpretive training, community-based social marketing, all of these things are telling us that if you can't get that audience interest, they're not going to go home with any real knowledge gained, any real impact. But if you can adapt on the fly, if you can, start that conversation with them, figuring out how you can come at your topic from something, from their position, something to get their interest. I've had class workshops with kids where that kid who's just at the back of the room doesn't want to be there, isn't engaged. You get the right thing to spark his interest, and suddenly they're the most engaged student. They go home, they tell other kids. Just don't, it constantly surprises me that you can spend all of this time trying to make an inclusive workshop, something like that, and then you just kind of have to roll with it when you get out in the field. So don't let that discourage you. It can surprise you, but if you could roll with it, you can have far more effective outreach efforts and far more impactful occasions with these volunteers.
Terry Macarthur always says that flexibility is my favorite F word. So just saying. And those of you who are water communicators, forgive me, I'm going to put in a plug here. Every year I try to attend a conference put on by Rogue Water Lab called Catalyst. This year it's back in person again. Yay. It's in San Antonio the last week in July. It is such an unconference conference. It's designed to keep you mentally shaken up so that you're paying attention at all times. So every day of the conference, you leave from the place where you start and you visit at least 2 other locations, usually on foot, walk to someplace else and do something, have some different event at different places. They're all about how to communicate. It's a water communicators conference is what it is. So if you have any interest, this past week, I think there were still a few openings left. They limit it to 100 people because you can imagine the logistics involved. But if you're interested in water communication, consider Catalyst. So.
All right, that's a hot tip from Terry. And it looks like we're coming up on the end of our meeting time. So I guess that's as good a place as any to go ahead and wrap up our panel. But I did want to thank again our speakers today, Matthew, Karsten, Terry, and Kendall. And I guess we can open it up at this point if anyone in the meeting has any announcements they'd like to make or any events they'd like to plug that are coming up. We can open the floor for that. You can add it into the chat, or if anyone in the room would like to plug something, we can do that here.
Rachel, I wanted to remind everyone that I placed the link to the survey. Tell us how we did. Make sure that we can make these events great for you in the future. If you take a survey, it's like 5 questions. Easy.
It is easy. I've taken it myself, I promise. All right. Well, if we have no further announcements or questions, I guess we'll go ahead and release everybody. Thank you guys again for coming to the workshop, and be sure to take that survey. The link is in the chat, and we also have printouts in the room if anyone's interested in filling those out. So thank you guys. Oh, we do have something from Matthew. Do you want to unmute and just let us know?
Sure. So just real quickly, we Galveston Bay Estuary program are going to be partnering with American Bird Conservancy and Splash, which is the stopping plastics and litter along shorelines. And we're going to be doing a post 4th of July weekend cleanup on the morning of July 5th at the Texas City Dike. If anybody's interested in getting out, we're going to try to do it when it's only moderately scorching outside. I don't think the registration link is up yet, but it'll be on Splash's website, which is splashtx.org. And So yeah, if anybody's interested in coming out to help us do some cleaning up, we'd love to have you join us.
Thanks, Matt. And I also see that Charlotte posted, there's plenty of stuff coming up with the Galveston Bay Foundation. And we have some links there in the chat for anyone who's interested. All right, I guess we will officially adjourn the meeting. Thanks again.